The folder of old photos slipped from my hand, scattering across the polished mahogany table as my uncle's words hung in the air. "We're cutting you out, Rebecca." His voice was calm, cold, like he was discussing nothing more important than the weather forecast. 20 years of my life dedicated to our family business, and they were discarding me like yesterday's newspaper. "Excuse me," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Around the long conference table, the faces of my relatives, my family, remained carefully neutral. My cousin Peter studied his manicured fingernails. My Aunt Meredith suddenly found her teacup fascinating. Only my Uncle Howard, who had just delivered this bombshell, met my gaze directly, his steel-gray eyes unflinching behind designer glasses. "The board has voted. We're restructuring the company, streamlining operations. Your position has been eliminated." The words were corporate, sterile, as if he hadn't taught me to ride a bike when I was 6, as if we hadn't shared Christmas dinners for 4 decades. I glanced at the scattered photos. Our founder, my grandfather, breaking ground on our first factory. My father working late into the night at his desk. Me, fresh out of business school, standing proudly beside Uncle Howard when we opened our international office. 3 generations of Callaways built into those fading images. "This isn't right, and you know it," I said quietly, hands trembling slightly as I gathered the photos. "I've given everything to Calloway Textiles." Howard sighed, the sound heavy with false sympathy. "Business isn't about sentiment, Rebecca. It's about results. The European market expansion you've been managing has underperformed for 3 quarters now. Because you cut my budget in half last year. I told you we needed." "The decision is final," he interrupted, sliding a manila folder across the table. "Your severance package. It's quite generous. 6 months' salary, health benefits through the end of the year." The room felt suddenly airless, the walls closing in. 6 months' salary for 20 years of service. For missing my father's funeral because I was closing a deal in Milan. For postponing having children because the company always came first. "I deserve better than this," I said, not touching the folder. My cousin Peter cleared his throat. "We all have to make sacrifices, Becca. The company—" "Don't," I cut him off. "Don't pretend this is about the company. This is about Howard consolidating power, just like he did when my father died." The words came out sharper than I intended, tearing through the carefully maintained veneer of family harmony. Aunt Meredith flinched. Peter looked away uncomfortably. Howard's expression hardened. "I think you should take some time to process this, Rebecca. Go home. Review the paperwork. Sign it within 48 hours. But I warn you," his voice dropped lower, "if you consider any sort of legal action, remember that your father's original partnership agreement included a mandatory arbitration clause. No court will hear your case." I stood slowly, legs unsteady beneath me. The room was spinning, but I refused to show weakness. 20 years in this cutthroat industry had taught me to keep my emotions locked away during business hours. "This meeting is adjourned," Howard announced, already checking his watch. "I have a call with our Tokyo partners in 15 minutes. One by one, they filed out. My family members turned strangers, each avoiding my eyes. Only Peter paused at the door, hesitating. "I'm sorry, Becca. It wasn't unanimous." The door closed, leaving me alone in the room that had witnessed hundreds of family meetings, arguments, celebrations. I sank back into my chair, heart hammering against my ribs. They didn't know. They had no idea what I discovered last month while preparing quarterly reports. No idea that I'd been meeting with lawyers, accountants, and a private investigator. No idea that in cutting me out, they had just made their worst possible move. And they certainly had no idea that I'd purchased controlling interest in our company through a shell corporation 3 weeks ago. I pulled out my phone and texted my attorney. They did it. Exactly as we predicted. Set the meeting for tomorrow. Then I picked up my grandfather's photo, tucked it carefully into my purse, and left the severance package untouched on the table. The glass of wine in my hand was still full, untouched after 20 minutes. From my apartment terrace, the city lights blurred through unshed tears I refused to let fall. Behind me, my phone buzzed incessantly, messages from concerned colleagues, a voicemail from my mother asking why Howard had called her, and several texts from my best friend Sophia, demanding to know what happened at the meeting. I couldn't bring myself to answer any of them. Not yet. Not when the betrayal still felt like a physical wound. A gentle knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. I considered ignoring it, but the soft "Rebecca, I know you're in there" in Sophia's voice made me set down my glass. When I opened the door, Sophia took one look at my face and stepped forward to hug me. "That bad, huh?" "Worse." I managed, my composure finally cracking. They cut me out. Completely. Sophia, never one to stand on ceremony, moved past me to my kitchen, pulling a second wine glass from the cabinet. "Tell me everything," she commanded, uncorking a new bottle with practiced ease. As we settled on my sofa, the story spilled out: the cold meeting, Howard's clipped words, the insulting severance package. The decades of sacrifice ending with a manila folder I couldn't even bring myself to open. "Those ungrateful bastards," Sophia swore, refilling my now empty glass. "After everything you've done for them? After you saved the Charleston mill when Howard wanted to close it? After you worked through pneumonia last year to secure the Johnson account?" I smiled weakly. Business isn't about sentiment. It's about results. "Bullshit," she snapped. "It's about Howard never forgiving your father for being the smarter brother. It's about him resenting that your grandfather made them equal partners instead of giving him controlling interest." She wasn't wrong. The tension between my father and Howard had been legendary in family circles. Two brilliant men with different visions for the company my grandfather had built from nothing. When my father died unexpectedly 10 years ago, Howard had swiftly moved to consolidate power, gradually sidelining me despite my equal education and experience. "I'm tired, Sophia," I admitted, the weight of the day pressing down on me. So tired of fighting for a place at the table that should have been mine by right. Sophia studied me carefully. "So what are you going to do? Take the severance? Look for another position? You know Weston Fabrics would hire you in a heartbeat." I sipped my wine, savoring the rich taste before answering. "Actually, I've been making some moves they don't know about." Her eyebrows shot up. "What kind of moves?" "Remember Jennifer Wu? My roommate from business school." "The scary smart investment banker?" "Sure. She helped me set up a holding company 3 months ago. Very discreet, very private." I couldn't help the small smile forming on my lips. "When my father died, he left me some stocks and investments outside the family business. I've been building on them quietly for years." Sophia leaned forward, intrigued. "Rebecca Calloway, what have you done?" "I've been buying Calloway Textiles stock through my holding company. Small blocks, nothing noticeable. Then last month, I found something while reviewing our European subsidiaries' accounts." I paused, the memory still fresh. Howard had been cooking the books, Sophia, using company funds for personal expenses, hiding losses, inflating earnings. That son of a... I hired a forensic accountant to verify what I found. Then I went to our 3 biggest shareholders with the evidence and an offer to buy their shares at a premium. I took another sip of wine. They sold to me last week. I now control 52% of Calloway Textiles. Sophia's jaw dropped. You own the company?" "I do." The statement felt surreal even as I said it. "Howard, Peter, Aunt Meredith, they have no idea. They think they're cutting me out, but they've actually just handed me exactly what I needed." "Which is what?" "A clean break. If I'd stayed as European marketing director while becoming majority shareholder, there would be questions about conflicts of interest, about my methods. This way..." I shrugged, a spark of fierce satisfaction warming my chest for the first time that day. "This way, I'm just a wronged family member who coincidentally happens to own the company that fired her. Sophia's smile turned predatory. Oh, I would pay good money to see Howard's face when he finds out. You won't have to pay. I've called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow at noon. As majority shareholder, I can do that. I reached for my phone, scrolling to the calendar reminder. I'd like you to be there if you can get away from the gallery. Try and stop me, she laughed, clinking her glass against mine. Rebecca Calloway, secret corporate raider. Who would have thought? But as her laughter faded, I found myself staring at the family photo on my mantel. My father, mother, me at my business school graduation. His proud smile, his hand on my shoulder. I'm not doing this for revenge, Sophia, I said quietly. I'm doing it because my father and grandfather built something important, something that matters to hundreds of employees and their families. Howard has been running it into the ground with his short-term thinking and self-dealing. Sophia's expression softened. I know, honey, you're not a vengeful person, but a mischievous glint returned to her eye. It doesn't hurt that justice will be served in the most beautifully ironic way possible. For the first time that day, I laughed genuinely. No, I agreed, raising my glass in a toast. It doesn't hurt at all. I barely slept that night, rehearsing what I would say, how I would handle the inevitable outrage. By morning, I was operating on pure adrenaline, selecting my outfit with surgical precision. A charcoal gray suit, crisp white blouse, the ruby earrings my father had given me when I joined the company. Power clothes, my armor for battle. My attorney, Marcus Chin, met me for coffee an hour before the meeting. Are you ready for this? He asked, sliding a folder across the table. Everything's in order. The stock transfer is complete, all properly registered with the SEC. Your position is legally unassailable. I nodded, scanning the documents, and the evidence of financial impropriety, substantial and well-documented. The forensic accountant's report is damning. Marcus hesitated. Rebecca, you should be prepared. Your uncle won't go down without a fight. I know. He'll threaten, bluster, possibly try to claim I obtained the shares through deception. Which isn't true. You made legitimate offers based on legitimate concerns about management. Yes, but Howard has always been good at twisting the truth. I closed the folder, squaring my shoulders. He taught me everything I know about business negotiations, Marcus, including when to play my ace card. Marcus nodded approvingly. Just remember, stay calm, stick to facts, and don't let him bait you into an emotional response. I won't. This isn't personal, I said, even as a small voice in my head whispered that it was, indeed, very personal. The conference room was tense when I arrived precisely at noon. Howard, Peter, and Meredith were already seated, along with 2 other board members. Sophia had positioned herself against the wall, arms crossed, observing silently. My mother, to my surprise, sat at the far end of the table, her expression unreadable. Howard frowned when he saw me. Rebecca, this is a closed board meeting. I don't recall inviting you. Funny, I replied coolly, setting my briefcase on the table. I don't recall inviting you either, yet here we are. Confusion flickered across his face. What are you talking about? I called this meeting to discuss the transition plan now that you're departing. Actually, Marcus interjected, stepping forward to distribute documents to everyone present. Ms. Calloway called this meeting, as is her right as majority shareholder of Calloway Textiles. The words landed like a bomb. Howard's face went from confused to pale to flushed with anger in seconds. Peter gasped audibly. Aunt Meredith clutched her pearl necklace. This is absurd, Howard sputtered. Rebecca doesn't own any voting shares. Her father's shares were distributed among the board after his death. If you'll direct your attention to the documents before you, Marcus continued smoothly, you'll see that over the past 3 months, White Birch Holdings has acquired 52% of all outstanding Calloway Textiles shares. White Birch Holdings is wholly owned by Rebecca Calloway. Howard slammed his hand on the table. This is impossible. We would have known if someone was buying up that much stock. Not if it was done carefully through multiple brokers in small blocks, I explained, meeting his gaze steadily. A strategy one learned from you, Uncle Howard, if you recall. The Henderson acquisition, 2008. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed by something I'd rarely seen there, fear. You can't do this, he said, voice lowering. Whatever you think you're doing, it won't work. The board won't stand for it. The board, I replied evenly, serves at the pleasure of the shareholders, and I am now the majority shareholder. Peter leaned forward, his usual smugness replaced by uncertainty. Becca, what exactly are you planning to do? I opened my briefcase and withdrew a thick binder. First, I'm going to address the financial irregularities I discovered in our European operations, specifically the systematic misuse of company funds by our current CEO. I slid the forensic accountant's report into the center of the table. Second, I will be calling for a vote to reconstitute the board with members who have the company's best interests at heart. And third, I paused, allowing the tension to build. I will be assuming the position of CEO, effective immediately. Howard laughed, though the sound held no humor. This is your revenge play for being let go? It's pathetic, Rebecca, and it won't stand. This isn't about revenge, Howard. I kept my voice calm, professional, though inside my heart was racing. It's about saving a 100-year-old company from your mismanagement. It's about protecting the legacy my grandfather and father built. You conniving little. Howard. My mother's voice cut through his brewing tirade, surprising everyone. She'd been silent until now, watching the exchange with careful eyes. I think you should look at page 47 of this report before you say anything you'll regret. All eyes turned to her. She rarely involved herself in company business after my father died, preferring to focus on her charitable foundation. Howard had always dismissed her as uninterested, uninformed. With trembling fingers, Howard flipped to the indicated page. His face drained of color. That's right, I said quietly. I know about the shell companies in the Cayman Islands. I know about the diverted profits, the falsified records, the personal expenses charged to the company. All of it. The room fell silent. Even Sophia looked shocked at this revelation. You wouldn't, Howard whispered. You wouldn't expose this. It would damage the company, our family name. I don't want to, I agreed, which is why I'm offering you a choice. I slid another document across the table. Option 1. Resign as CEO and from the board. Sign a 5-year non-compete agreement and walk away with your personal investments intact. We handle this privately, protect the company's reputation, and move forward. And option 2? Peter asked when Howard remained silent. I turn this evidence over to the SEC and the Department of Justice. I said simply, corporate fraud, tax evasion, wire fraud, the penalties are substantial, including prison time. Howard's eyes, so like my father's yet so different in their cold calculation, bored into mine. You would destroy your own family. You destroyed our family yesterday, Howard, when you threw away 20 years of my loyalty and service without a second thought. For the first time, I allowed some of my hurt to show. Did you think I would just disappear? Take my severance and slink away? I thought you would be sensible, he growled. Accept the situation like a professional. I am being professional. I'm addressing a serious corporate governance issue with evidence and a reasonable resolution path. I tapped the resignation agreement. Your choice, Howard. Dignity or disgrace. For a moment, I thought he might lunge across the table at me. Then, with deliberate slowness, he uncapped his pen and signed the document. You'll regret this, he said, voice low and threatening. You're not cut out for this level of leadership. You never were. I smiled thinly. That's where you're wrong. I'm exactly what this company needs. I looked around the table. Now, shall we vote on the reconstitution of the board? 3 hours later it was done. Howard had left, taking nothing but his personal items, his remaining dignity scraped together like crumbs. The boardroom had been a battleground of legal terms, accusations, and eventually grudging acceptance. My mother, surprising everyone including me, had agreed to take a board seat. Peter, after a private conversation in the hallway, had resigned his position but accepted a role managing our West Coast distribution, where his talents could be useful but his potential for damage limited. As the last board member filed out, Sophia approached, whistling low. "Remind me never to cross you, Rebecca Calloway." I sank into the CEO's chair, my chair now, the adrenaline finally ebbing, leaving me drained. Was I too harsh? Are you kidding? He was stealing from the company. He fired you after 20 years of dedication. If anything, you were too merciful. She perched on the edge of the table. So what happens now? I ran my fingers along the smooth wood grain of the table where my grandfather had once sat, where my father had outlined his vision for the company's future, where I had just reclaimed my birthright. Now comes the hard part, I admitted. Rebuilding trust with our employees, stabilizing our European markets, repairing relationships with vendors Howard alienated. If anyone can do it, you can, my mother said, returning to the room. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her touch light but reassuring. Your father would be so proud, Rebecca. The words warmed something cold inside me. You never told me you were tracking Howard's activities. She smiled enigmatically. Just because I chose not to sit on the board doesn't mean I wasn't paying attention. Charles was my husband for 35 years. Protecting his legacy matters to me too. Sophia checked her watch. I hate to break up this moment, but don't you have an all-hands meeting in 10 minutes? Your first address as CEO. Reality crashed back. I hadn't prepared remarks, hadn't thought beyond the confrontation with Howard. What am I going to say to them? I wondered aloud. The truth, my mother said simply, that Calloway Textiles is returning to its founding principles. Quality products, ethical management, and a commitment to the people who make our success possible. Gathering my notes, I stood, smoothing my jacket. I should get down there. As I reached the door, Sophia called after me, Hey, Becca? When you imagined taking over the company someday, is this how you pictured it? I paused, considering. No, I admitted. But maybe this is better. A clean break with the past. A chance to rebuild on my own terms. Well then, she grinned, go get him, boss. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders as I walked toward the company auditorium, where hundreds of employees waited to learn their fate under new leadership. But for the first time in years, that weight felt balanced, proportionate, like it belonged there. Howard had tried to cut me out. Instead, he had freed me to become exactly what I was always meant to be. My father's daughter, my grandfather's heir, and now, finally, the leader of Calloway Textiles. The auditorium fell silent as I stepped onto the stage. Hundreds of eyes fixed on me, expressions ranging from curious to concerned to openly skeptical. These were the people who made Calloway Textiles function, from the senior executives in the front row to the production line workers who had taken time away from their shifts to attend. My throat tightened. This wasn't a quarterly marketing presentation or a product launch. This was my first act as CEO, the moment that would set the tone for everything to follow. Good afternoon, I began, my voice steady despite the flutter in my stomach. For those who don't know me, I'm Rebecca Calloway. As of today, I am the new Chief Executive Officer of Calloway Textiles. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Though many knew me from my marketing role, seeing me stand where Howard had dominated for a decade was clearly jarring. I know this comes as a surprise. Change often does. But this change represents a return to our company's foundational values. I paused, making eye contact with familiar faces in the audience. My grandfather started this company with the belief that quality fabrics, ethical business practices, and respect for every person in the production chain would lead to sustainable success. My father continued that legacy. Today, I recommit us to those principles. In the third row, I spotted Martha Daniels, who had been my father's executive assistant and now performed the same role for Howard. Her eyebrows were raised in undisguised shock. Beside her, James Wilkinson, our head of production, leaned forward with interest. There will be questions about the transition, I continued. To address the most immediate, Howard Calloway has resigned as CEO and from the board, effective immediately. Peter Calloway will be transitioning to lead our West Coast distribution division. A new board has been constituted, and we will be conducting a thorough review of all company operations in the coming weeks. Another wave of whispers swept the room. I waited for it to subside. I won't pretend this transition will be seamless. There will be challenges, adjustments, and yes, changes to how we operate. But I make you this promise. Every decision will be made with transparency, integrity, and the long-term health of this company, and every person who works here as the priority. In the back, I noticed a hand shoot up. It belonged to Stephen Ross, a senior weaver who had been with the company since my grandfather's time. I hadn't planned to take questions, but Steve's 40 years of loyal service earned him the right to speak. Yes, Steve. I acknowledged. Ms. Calloway, Rebecca, begging your pardon, but we've heard fine words before. His South Carolina drawl carried clearly through the auditorium. 3 years ago, when Mr. Howard was fixin' to close the Charleston mill, you fought to keep it open. You saved 500 jobs. So I'll ask plain, is the Charleston operation safe under your leadership? The question cut to the heart of many employees' fears. Howard had repeatedly threatened to move production overseas, using potential closures as leverage in negotiations. The Charleston mill will not only remain open, Steve, but will be expanding its operations by the end of the quarter. A spontaneous burst of applause erupted from a group of workers in the corner. Charleston employees stationed at headquarters for training. In fact, my first official act as CEO this morning was to cancel the exploratory committee investigating outsourcing options for our domestic production lines. This time, the applause was more widespread. I raised a hand to quiet it. I believe in American manufacturing. I believe in the craftsmanship that comes from generations of textile expertise. And I believe that treating our employees with dignity and fair compensation isn't just ethically right, it's good business. Martha Daniels was now scribbling furiously in her notebook. James Wilkinson nodded slowly, a cautious smile forming. Tomorrow, I'll be sending out a detailed communication about our immediate plans and priorities. For now, I ask for your patience, your input, and your continued dedication to the work that has made Calloway Textiles a leader in our industry for over a century. I took a breath, then abandoned my prepared closing for something more personal. My father used to say that a company is only as strong as the people who bring it to life each day. Looking out at all of you right now, I can say with complete confidence, Calloway Textiles isn't just strong, it's unbreakable. Thank you. As I stepped away from the podium, the applause was respectful but reserved. They were waiting to see if my actions would match my words. I couldn't blame them. Howard had made grand pronouncements too, before quietly undermining them with budget cuts and policy changes. I would need to earn their trust, one decision at a time. You did well, my mother observed, handing me a cup of tea in my, formerly Howard's, office later that afternoon. They were listening. They were judging, I corrected, sinking into the leather chair that still felt too large, as they should be. The office felt foreign, despite my having visited it hundreds of times. Howard's personal items were gone, but his presence lingered in the arranged furniture, the specific books on the shelves, the faint smell of his cologne. I would need to make this space my own, but that was a project for another day. Have you heard from him? I asked, not needing to specify who. My mother's mouth tightened slightly. He called your Aunt Catherine. Apparently, he's portraying himself as the victim of a hostile takeover by his ungrateful niece. I snorted. Of course he is. It doesn't matter, Rebecca. What matters is what you do next. She studied me over the rim of her teacup. Howard made his first mistake years ago when he underestimated you after your father died. He made his second mistake yesterday when he thought he could discard you without consequences. Don't make the mistake of focusing on him instead of the company. I'm not, I insisted, though part of me recognized the warning as justified. I'm meeting with the financial team at 4 to begin reviewing the European operations in detail. Marcus is bringing in forensic accountants to help us understand the full scope of Howard's creative accounting. Good. She nodded approvingly. And the Charleston expansion? Was that planned or an impulse? A bit of both, I admitted. I've had the proposal ready for months, but Howard always blocked it. The numbers make sense. Our domestic products command a premium, and the Charleston facility has our lowest defect rate. The infrastructure is already there for expansion. A knock at the door interrupted us. Martha Daniels entered without waiting for a response. Clearly a habit developed with Howard. Ms. Calloway, your 4 o'clock is waiting in the conference room. She hesitated. Also, Mr. Wilkinson was hoping for a few minutes of your time regarding the production schedule for the Adams hotel chain order. An awkward pause followed as Martha clearly struggled with how to relate to me in my new role. She had always been coolly professional in our interactions, loyal to Howard above all others. Thank you, Martha, I said. Please tell Mr. Wilkinson I can meet him at 5:30. And Martha, I added as she turned to leave, I know this transition is unexpected. I value your experience and institutional knowledge. I hope you'll consider staying on as my executive assistant. Surprise flickered across her face. Ah, yes. Thank you, Ms. Calloway. After she left, my mother raised an eyebrow. Keeping Howard's right hand? Brave choice. Martha goes where the power is, I replied. She knows this company's inner workings better than anyone. Besides, I'd rather have her inside the tent than outside it, especially during transition. My mother smiled. Your father used to say the same thing. Keep your friends close and your organizational chart closer. The mention of my father brought a familiar tightness to my chest. Do you think he would approve of how I did this? She considered the question seriously, taking her time before answering. Charles believed in earning your position, not being handed it. He would have respected that you fought for what you believed was yours. She set down her teacup with a decisive click. But more importantly, he would want you to stop looking backward and start looking forward. You have a company to run now. Standing, she straightened her jacket, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. I'll leave you to your meeting. Dinner on Sunday. I'll be there, I promised, rising to walk her to the door. As she left, I took a moment to center myself before heading to face the financial team. The day had been a whirlwind of emotions and high-stakes confrontations, but the hardest work was just beginning. The situation is worse than we initially thought, Marcus said grimly, sliding a spreadsheet across the conference table 3 days later. Howard's financial manipulations extend beyond the European operations. We've found irregularities in at least 3 domestic subsidiaries as well. I studied the numbers, my stomach sinking. How bad is the actual financial position? Jennifer Wu, my business school friend who had helped me establish the holding company, tapped a figure at the bottom of the page. Cash reserves are approximately 30% lower than reported in the last quarterly statement. Operating costs have been underreported by about 18%. Several vendor payments are significantly overdue. Jesus, I muttered. How did this get past the auditors? Marcus shrugged. A combination of shell companies, falsified invoices, and the fact that Howard personally selected the auditing firm. They weren't looking very hard. The conference room felt suddenly claustrophobic. I stood, pacing to the window that overlooked the city. The Calloway building had occupied this corner for 60 years, a testament to my family's legacy. Now I wondered if that legacy might crumble under the weight of Howard's deception. "We need to restate the earnings," I said finally. "Come clean about the actual financial position." Jennifer winced. "That will cause a stock hit, potentially significant." "I know, but covering up Howard's fraud would make me complicit. I won't start my tenure with a lie." "There's also the matter of the Johnson contract," Marcus added. "The delivery timeline Howard promised them is impossible given our actual production capacity. They're expecting full order fulfillment by the end of next month." I returned to the table, mind racing. The Johnson order is critical. It's our largest hospitality client. We can't lose them. A thought occurred to me. What if we temporarily repurposed the Milano line capacity? Those orders aren't due for 12 weeks. We could shift production to Johnson now, then double shift Milano in months 2 and 3. Jennifer made some quick calculations on her tablet. It would work, but it would increase overtime costs by about 15%. That's better than losing the Johnson account entirely. I made a note. What else? "The board meeting next week," Marcus reminded me. "You'll need to present a comprehensive recovery plan." I nodded, the weight of responsibility settling more firmly on my shoulders. "I'll have it ready. In the meantime, let's prepare the financial restatement. I want to get ahead of this, control the narrative." As they gathered their materials to leave, I added, "And I want employee payroll segregated and protected. No matter what else happens, people get paid on time." Jennifer gave me an appraising look. "That's not typically the first priority in a financial crisis recovery." "It is in my company," I said firmly. "The people on our factory floors and in our offices didn't create this mess. They won't pay the price for it." After they left, I remained at the table, surrounded by spreadsheets detailing the extent of Howard's financial manipulations. Part of me wanted to call him, to demand explanations, to ask how he could have betrayed the company my grandfather and father had built with such care. Instead, I picked up my phone and called James Wilkinson. "James, it's Rebecca. I need you to come to my office first thing tomorrow. We're going to completely revise the production schedule, and I need your expertise." The news broke on a Tuesday, exactly 1 week after I'd taken control of the company. The Wall Street Journal headline was succinct but devastating. "Calloway Textiles restates earnings amid leadership change. Stock falls 22%. I'd been prepared for the market reaction, but seeing the actual numbers was still a punch to the gut. My phone had been ringing constantly since the press release went out. Board members, shareholders, business reporters, all wanting explanations or reassurances. "Ms. Calloway," Mr. Turner from Bloomberg, is on line 1. "He's asking for a comment on the earnings restatement," Martha announced from the doorway. "Tell him we'll issue a statement this afternoon." I didn't look up from the production schedule I was revising. "And Martha, no more calls for the next hour. I need to finish this before the meeting with the department heads." She hesitated. "Your cousin Peter is in the lobby. He's quite insistent about seeing you." That made me look up. "Peter? Did he say what it's about?" "No, but he mentioned something about Charleston. Should I send him away?" I sighed, setting down my pen. "No, send him up." Peter entered my office with none of his usual swagger. The confident, borderline arrogant cousin who had so often spoken over me in meetings now looked almost hesitant. "Rebecca," he nodded in greeting. "You're looking authoritative behind that desk. What can I do for you, Peter?" I gestured to the chair opposite mine. "I assume this isn't a social call." He sat, fidgeting with his expensive watch. "I've been at the West Coast Distribution Center for the past week." "I know. I approved your travel requisition." "Right." He cleared his throat. "While I was there, I received some interesting calls. From Howard. My guard immediately went up. I see. He wanted me to share some information with buyers from our major accounts about the company's financial troubles. He thought it might encourage them to delay orders or seek other suppliers. Cold anger flooded through me. He's trying to sabotage the company. That's how I interpreted it. Peter met my eyes directly for perhaps the first time in our adult relationship. I didn't make those calls, Rebecca. The admission hung in the air between us. I studied my cousin's face, looking for the deception I'd come to expect from him, but saw only uncomfortable sincerity. Why are you telling me this? Peter sighed heavily. Because, contrary to what you probably think, I do care about this company. And because... He hesitated. I've never seen the Charleston operation numbers before. Howard always handled that division personally. But now that I'm reviewing all our distribution channels, you've seen that Charleston is actually our most profitable domestic operation. I finished for him. Despite Howard's claims that it was underperforming. Yes. He looked genuinely troubled. He lied to the board, to all of us, for years. I leaned back in my chair, processing this unexpected alliance. Howard never believed in American manufacturing. He wanted to move everything offshore where labor was cheaper, regardless of quality impact. Charleston was just the first target. I'm beginning to understand that. Peter ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of my father that it made my chest ache momentarily. Look, Rebecca, I know you and I have never been close. But I want you to know that I'm committed to my new role, and I won't be taking any more calls from Howard. The olive branch was unexpected. I considered my response carefully. I appreciate that, Peter. The company needs all hands on deck right now. He nodded, rising to leave. At the door, he paused. By the way, your plan to shift production for the Johnson order? It's working. The first shipments went out yesterday. Quality checks all passed. James Wilkinson says it's the smoothest emergency production adjustment he's seen in 20 years. After he left, I sat quietly, turning this new development over in my mind. Peter choosing the company, choosing me, over Howard was significant. Perhaps the family fractures weren't as irreparable as I'd thought. My contemplation was interrupted by Martha's voice on the intercom. Ms. Calloway, they're ready for you in the conference room. Gathering my materials, I prepared to face my department heads with our recovery strategy. 1 week into my tenure as CEO, and I was already fighting for the company's survival. But for the first time since taking control, I felt a flicker of optimism beneath the worry. The Johnson order shipped complete and on time. I announced to the assembled board members, clicking to the next slide in my presentation. Quality control reported 0 defects, and the client has already placed a follow-up order for their new resort properties. 2 months had passed since the earnings restatement. They had been the most challenging, exhausting weeks of my professional life. Endless meetings, difficult decisions, hard conversations with vendors, clients, and employees. But slowly, steadily, we were stabilizing. That's excellent news, Gloria Henderson remarked. The newest board member, a retired textile industry veteran I'd recruited personally, had become a valuable ally. What about the stock price recovery? We're up 8% from our low point, Jennifer reported. Still down 14% from pre-announcement levels, but moving in the right direction. The market is responding to our transparency and our clear recovery roadmap. Around the table, heads nodded approvingly. The new board, a mix of industry experts, financial professionals, and 2 long-serving employees, had fully supported my decision to come clean about Howard's financial manipulations. They had also approved my recovery strategy, despite its emphasis on protecting jobs over short-term profits. And the European restructuring? Asked Thomas Feldman, our most skeptical board member. On track, I confirmed. We've consolidated our Milan and Paris operations into a single headquarters in Lyon, which has reduced overhead by 22% without a single job loss. Production efficiency is up 11% quarter over quarter. Impressive, Thomas acknowledged, but I'm still concerned about the lawsuit Howard has threatened. A ripple of tension moved through the room. Howard, true to form, had not gone quietly into retirement. After the earnings restatement, he had publicly accused me of corporate espionage and threatened legal action to reclaim his position. The lawsuit is a bluff, Marcus stated confidently. Howard knows that any legal discovered process would expose his financial improprieties in painful detail. Our counsel believes he's posturing to save face with his business associates. I added, we've received no formal legal notice, only vague threats through intermediaries. Our focus remains on rebuilding the company, not on Howard's wounded pride. The meeting continued for another hour, covering production forecasts, new market opportunities, and the promising early results from our expanded Charleston operation. When it concluded, the mood was cautiously optimistic, a dramatic shift from the crisis atmosphere of just 8 weeks earlier. As the board members filtered out, my mother lingered, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. You're finding your rhythm, she observed once we were alone. Trying to, I admitted, gathering my presentation materials. Some days are better than others. Charles had the same experience when he took over from your grandfather. The first 6 months, he came home every night questioning every decision. She straightened a chair that had been left askew, but he grew into the role. As you are. The comparison to my father warmed me. I wish he could see this. Oh, he can see it, she said with quiet certainty. He always believed you would lead this company someday, even when Howard was doing everything possible to push you aside. We walked together, toward my office, the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows illuminating the framed photographs I'd recently added to the corridor. The company's history and images, from my grandfather breaking ground on the first factory to my father opening international markets to my own recent visit to the Charleston facility. Speaking of Howard, my mother said as we reached my office door, Catherine mentioned he's been making inquiries about selling his remaining personal shares in the company. I raised an eyebrow. Really? To whom? Apparently he approached Bradley Westfield. The name sent a jolt through me. Bradley Westfield was CEO of our largest competitor, Westfield Fabrics. That would be problematic, I said carefully. My mother's expression was innocent, but her eyes held a mischievous gleam. It might be if someone else didn't purchase those shares first. Someone who already has controlling interest. I laughed despite the seriousness of the situation. You think I should buy Howard out completely? I think it would be satisfying, she acknowledged. But more importantly, it would be strategic. Consolidating ownership would prevent any future complications. Before I could respond, Martha approached with her tablet in hand. Ms. Calloway, I have James Wilkinson on the line. The new European orders have come in, and they're significantly larger than projected. He needs authorization to increase production capacity immediately. Good news for once, I remarked to my mother. I should take this. She nodded, squeezing my arm gently. Dinner on Sunday? Peter and his wife are coming. He specifically asked if you would be there. Another surprising olive branch for my cousin. I'll be there. As I turned to enter my office, Martha said, Oh, and Miss Calloway? A courier delivered this. She handed me a small package. It's from your Aunt Meredith. Curious, I opened the package once I was alone. Inside was a small velvet box containing a pair of gold cufflinks engraved with the Calloway Textiles logo, my grandfather's, which had passed to my father and which Howard had claimed after my father's death. A note in Meredith's elegant handwriting read simply, These belong to the CEO of Calloway Textiles. Howard should never have taken them. Your grandfather would be proud of what you've done these past months. So would Charles. I ran my fingers over the engraved logo, throat tight with sudden emotion. Then I placed the cufflinks carefully on my desk and picked up the phone to call James Wilkinson about the European orders. Howard had tried to cut me out, to erase my place in the family business. Instead, he had created the very circumstances that allowed me to claim it fully, completely, and on my own terms. The irony wasn't lost on me as I authorized the production increase. Neither was the responsibility that came with it. To the company, to our employees, to the legacy my grandfather and father had built. A legacy that was now securely in my hands, where it had always belonged. 6 months later, the Charleston factory floor hummed with activity as I walked through with James Wilkinson, inspecting the new production line that had just been installed. Workers nodded respectfully as we passed. Some even smiled or called out greetings. The atmosphere was markedly different from my first visit as CEO, when tension and uncertainty had hung in the air like the cotton fibers that floated above the looms. Production capacity is up 37%, James reported proudly. Quality metrics have remained consistent even with the increased output, and employee retention has improved dramatically. The profit-sharing program probably didn't hurt, I observed, pausing to examine a particularly complex weaving pattern being created for a luxury hotel chain. No, it certainly didn't, James agreed with a grin. Neither did the on-site childcare center you approved, or the healthcare improvements. The investments had been substantial, but strategic. My philosophy, putting employees and quality first, had initially raised eyebrows among some board members and shareholders. But the results were becoming difficult to argue with. Productivity up, costs down, employee satisfaction at record highs, and our reputation in the industry steadily rebuilding. Ms. Calloway. Steve Ross, the senior weaver who had questioned me at my first all-hands meeting, approached with a sample of fabric in his hands. Thought you might want to see this. It's the new Calloway signature series we've been developing. First run just came off the line this morning. I accepted the fabric square, running my fingers over the extraordinarily fine weave. It was beautifully made, perhaps the highest quality product we'd ever produced. This is exceptional, Steve. Truly. Pride shone in his weathered face. We're calling it the Legacy Collection. Thought that was fitting. The name brought a lump to my throat. Very fitting. Thank you. As Steve returned to his station, my phone buzzed with a message from Martha. Quarterly financials just in. Profits up 18% year over year. Board will be pleased. I smiled, tucking the phone away without responding. The numbers were gratifying, but standing here on the factory floor, watching skilled craftspeople create products of exceptional quality, feeling the energy and commitment that filled the space, this was the true measure of success. James and I completed our tour, then headed to the small office I maintained at the facility for my regular visits. As we discussed upcoming production schedules, Peter knocked on the open door. The distribution logistics for the Legacy Collection are finalized, he reported, handing me a folder. We can begin shipping to high-end retailers next month, exactly on schedule. My cousin had surprised me over these past months, embracing his role with unexpected dedication and skill. Our relationship, while still occasionally awkward, had evolved into a functional professional partnership, and perhaps the beginnings of the family connection that had always been missing. Excellent work, Peter, I acknowledged. Are you heading back to Charlotte today? Tomorrow morning. I thought I might join you for dinner with the management team tonight, if that's all right. Of course. I gestured to the chair opposite mine. Actually, while you're here, there's something I wanted to discuss with both of you. James and Peter exchanged curious glances as they settled in. As you know, we've been exploring potential expansion opportunities, I began. The company is stable now, our reputation rebuilding. The board has approved capital investment in new facilities. That's great news, James responded. Are we looking at existing operations or greenfield development? Both, potentially. I opened my laptop, turning it so they could see the presentation I'd prepared. I'm considering a bold move. establishing a new flagship facility that combines production, innovation, and training. A center of excellence for American textile manufacturing. As I outlined the vision, a state-of-the-art facility that would become the cornerstone of our domestic operations, combining cutting-edge technology with traditional craftsmanship. I could see growing excitement in their expressions. This would create hundreds of new jobs, Peter noted, studying the projections, and position us as the industry leader in American manufacturing. That's the idea, I confirmed. We'd be making a statement about our commitment to quality, to our workforce, and to domestic production. James whistled softly. Howard would have a stroke if he knew about this. It's everything he argued against for years. Howard was wrong, I said simply, about many things, but especially about the value of our American operations and our people. This new facility would be the physical embodiment of our recommitment to the principles my grandfather founded this company on. I'm in, Peter declared without hesitation. This is exactly the direction we should be moving. James nodded enthusiastically. The production team will be thrilled. Where are you thinking of locating it? I smiled, feeling a sense of rightness settle over me. I'm still weighing options. But my grandfather started in South Carolina because he believed in the skill of the craftspeople here. There seems something appropriate about coming full circle. Our meeting continued for another hour, the three of us building on the vision, identifying challenges, proposing solutions. The energy in the room reminded me of stories my father had told about the early days of the company, the excitement of creation, of building something meaningful. Later, as I stood alone at the window of my office, watching the sunset paint the Charleston factory in gold light, I thought about the journey of the past 8 months. From the devastating family meeting where Howard had tried to cast me aside to this moment of renewed purpose and vision. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Saw the stock ticker today. Impressive, CEO. Dinner when you're back in town. I smiled, typing back, absolutely. Much to celebrate. New expansion plans taking shape. Her reply came quickly. Always knew you were meant for this. Your father would be bursting with pride. The mention of my father brought both warmth and a familiar ache. I wished he could see what the company was becoming under my leadership, what I was becoming. My attention was drawn to movement on the factory floor below. The evening shift was arriving, greeting their departing colleagues with handshakes and conversation. Unlike the tension-filled transitions of Howard's era, there was an easy camaraderie now, a shared purpose. Howard had tried to cut me out of my own family's legacy, believing I would simply accept defeat and fade away. Instead, his action had forced me to fight for what was rightfully mine, and in doing so, discover a strength and vision I might never have fully realized otherwise. The company was thriving. The future was bright with possibility, and I was exactly where I belonged, continuing the legacy my grandfather had begun, that my father had built upon, and that was now mine to carry forward. Howard's attempt to cut me out had failed. Instead, he had inadvertently helped me claim my rightful place, not just as an heir to the Calloway name, but as a leader who had earned her position through determination, strategic thinking, and an unwavering commitment to the company's true values. As I watched the Charleston factory hum with productive energy below me, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was just the beginning of what we would build together. Howard had no idea what he'd set in motion when he'd tried to push me aside, but I did, and I was just getting started.